Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a good weekend, good Saturday. Let me just check that everything's working. Think it's working. Let me know if I've boomed. So, man, things are very frustrating in Britain. You're probably not aware, but Britain is currently run by the worst 2014, what the intersectionals would call white feminists, right? So, the distinction between intersectional feminism and white feminism was that, of course, white feminism didn't want to focus on race. It didn't want to focus on things that weren't advantageous to middle class, middle aged white women. And this was something that the non middle class, non middle aged, non white feminist women wanted to break, this kind of hegemony of the white middle class woman using feminism as a weapon against white middle class men. And so they coined a term called white feminism. Now, the white feminists, the middle class, middle aged white women, broke almost instantly under this assault. They were completely taken aback, completely taken over by this doctrine in the United States. And in Britain, they pay lip service to it. Now, you will see 2014's white feminism everywhere in Britain. It is the ruling doctrine of the British government and state when it comes to matters of gender relations. They only apply it to white men and boys. They never apply their white feminist analysis to any of the other races. And so we get things like this TV show or Netflix drama called Adolescence, where the white feminist will portray this as the sum total of everything that is happening, and everything that has ever happened against a woman is a form of misogyny and not something else. And their entire worldview, their entire modus operandi, is to then cascade out from this position until there is simply nothing left of masculinity on the other side. Because for them, what this is about is literally destroying men. And of course, men in the public sphere have been utterly gelded. There's not a single man left in the public eye who is authentically a man, and not someone who is essentially like a domestic pet. A kind of, what's the Uncle Tom, as it were. And what they want is to turn every man in Britain into this kind of Uncle Tom man, where he is actually not very masculine. He is actually not a leader. He is actually not courageous. He is actually just an enforcer for the longhouse. And this is, like I said, the ruling paradigm in Britain. All of our government agencies and institutions work this way. The sitting Labour government, the Prime Minister, is one of these enforcers. He's surrounded by these HR like Haridans. And I just want to be very clear. These people aren't Karens, right? Karens are people who, they could be these people, but are generally not. Are generally trying to appeal to social norms in order to get people to behave in an appropriate way. It's a different discussion on the Karen. These, what I'm going to call the HR Haridans. And the Haridans are these onerous older women who have gained institutional power, know that the law is behind them, and are prepared to mercilessly wield that in order to imposing a way of life on was like you. Right? If they had the same motivations and goals and drives, and you could say, yeah, no, in him or her, I see myself, and so I know what would be good for them because I was once in that position and I know what would have been good for me when I was that age, whether I got it or not. Well, these people can't do that. There is a profound lack of empathy that comes from the HR Haridan. And in fact, a kind of, describe it, kind of sadism that underpins everything that's happening here. And it really drives me crazy. I really dislike it. And this kind of sadism is just not found anywhere else, because it's the sadism of the rules applied as the person who gets to apply the rules decides whether it's the right thing to do or not. And I'm just... The mic keeps muting. It shouldn't do. Sorry, I'll fix that. And I'm absolutely... Let me change that. All right. Okay, this should be a bit better. But I'm absolutely tired of it, because the thing is, this is a real representation of what is happening to young boys all across this country, right? The reign of teachers, which are something like 70 or 80% women now, over the half of the human species, that they don't understand and don't care to understand, and now don't need to understand. It's really something that bothers me, because it amounts to a kind of perpetual social prison in which these young men become the inmates and are unable to break free. So let's talk about adolescence then, because this has created many waves in this country, and mostly for the wrong reasons. I mean, just let's initially talk about the frame. Right, look at the poster. I thought it'd be bigger. Okay, no, I can't get that poster any bigger. Right, okay, fine. But let's have a look at the frame. The frame of this is, of course, that the young man is evil. Right, you see him staring through the camera screen, and so the young man is essentially this pale, evil monster waiting to do something monstrous. And in the case of adolescence, it centers on a 13-year-old schoolboy who's arrested for the murder of a female classmate. Now, so yes, in this case, you have someone who has done something monstrous. But this isn't the normal way that these young men are approached by the system itself, by the institutions. The normal reason these young men are approached and processed like this by the institutions is that they've done something, well, not politically correct. They've done something to offend a schoolmarmish HR Haridan. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. That means that it violates their code of conduct. And that means that they get to sit down. And again, a lot of people saying, well, this is a false representation. We'll get into that in a minute. But actually, it's not. In many ways, this is, I think, a real representation. I think there are many, many young men and boys who have to sit in rooms like this with women like her, and without the ability to properly, to even vaguely articulate what the problem is, don't really understand why they act in the way that they act, don't understand why the system is so goddamn unsympathetic to them, and don't understand why they are effectively put through what amounts to psychological torture by these women. And no one has the balls to tell everyone that it should never be a woman doing this to a young boy. She can't know what he feels, and therefore she is an inappropriate person to do this. And if it was a young woman who is acting out in a different way or whatever it is, again, like the fact that they've framed this story as this is a murderer, I'm not trying to defend murderers, obviously, but this is a very extreme version of this story. Most of the time, this story is he wrote some graffiti on something, and we'll get to how this story, the normal version of this story. It's inappropriate to have this take place because she cannot empathize with him, because her world is so completely different to his. Her biological motives and instincts and pressures are so different to his. And the world is structured so differently for her experience than it is for his experience, that this amounts to a form of torture. And the show even shows us this. Anyway, so in adolescence, we have Jamie Miller, who is arrested for the murder of a classmate, or on the suspicion of the murder of a classmate. And he's held at a police station for questioning and remanded in custody. Investigations at Jamie's school and questioning by a forensic psychologist reveal that Jamie has been deeply disturbed by school bullying via social media, centered on incel subculture. So what people are taking from this is that this 13-year-old boy is an incel. Well, I think practically every 13-year-old boy is an incel, actually. And this is something that is wrong to criticize them for, but it's not really about incel For anyone who doesn't know, an incel is an involuntary celibate. So the feminists are once again picking on virgins. They've decided that that the people who have got the most problems in their lives are in fact the greatest threat to society. Totally unsympathetic. Totally unsympathetic to the problems that the incel might have. But a 13-year-old boy, I would suggest, is definitionally not an incel, because 13-year-old boys shouldn't be having sex. And therefore, if they were to be sexually active, something else would be wrong, and it's likely that someone's taking advantage of them and abusing them. But anyway, what the issue is not really incel, but it is male influencers. Now, I don't know what exactly it takes to become a masculine influencer, but of course the example of this, as given in every example, the platonic form of this is Andrew Tate. Now, it was Helen Dale that made a really good observation about Andrew Tate the other day and said, look, the reason that everyone's really bothered about Andrew Tate is actually that he is unchivalrous. He doesn't show empathy for women, and therefore he promotes a kind of lifestyle that is based around not having empathy for women. And that's a really great point. That's really what it comes down to. The question is, will I get mercy from someone who has power over me? And in the case of Andrew Tate, I don't know him personally, I've never spoken to him, I don't want to unfairly mischaracterize him, but from the perception that the people who are afraid of Andrew Tate and his influence take, what they're worried about is that one day they will be put at within the power of someone who is unchivalrous, who does not think that they should actually hold back and show mercy to someone within their power. Which is ironic, because that's precisely what's happening in scenes like this, up and down the country. These women are unchivalrous to men. If we had a better word for it, I would use a better word. But there's no word for the kind of grace that they should be giving to young boys. And it used to be summarized, and the feminists have done the best they can to destroy this term. But it was always the way to explain why things were happening to women who have no frame of reference for what is happening and don't understand. It was, well, boys will be boys. Now, of course, that doesn't excuse a murder or an alleged murder. But in the case of boys acting in ways that women can't understand, well, the men understand, right? We all, again, not in this particular case, but in the case of others who are not doing something terroristic or murdering or anything like this, but in those young men who are finding the system to be highly oppressive around them and pushing in, and they're just, okay, no, I'm going to share an Andrew Tate video or something like that, right? Why do you think he's doing that? And the answer that the HR Haridan has is, I have no idea, but I think he's going to kill someone. I don't think that they're actually going to kill someone. I think what they are is responding to a system that they find oppressive because it is designed to benefit a certain kind of woman, and this naturally punishes a certain kind of man. I think it was Christina Hoff Sommers who said that, look, feminists are treating boys as if they are defective girls. And I think this has been the most negative consequence of men ceding the educational ground. Because, of course, during like the 80s and 90s, it for some reason became fashionable to start casting aspersions on men who wanted to go into education, as if there was something a bit weird and pervy about them. It's like, why do you want to be around kids? Oh, you're a bit of a nonce, are you? And so men just ceded this ground. I know that sounds like that can't have been the reason, but I was alive at the time. It genuinely was the reason that men started not to go into teaching. And now I think it's 80% teachers are women in this country now. It's kind of, let me just double check that just to make sure I'm not getting that wrong. Sorry, 74%. 74%. There we go. 3/4 of teachers are women. And a significant portion of them are going to be HR Haridans, right? And so this kind of woman who wants to impose her order, her demands on someone else without taking any amount of time to try and understand their frame of reference or why they might be doing any of the things they're doing, is, like I said, a kind of torture and a way of oppressing them. And that's the entire conversation around this show. What this show has done is made them think, Christ, we're in danger from teenage boys and we need to start oppressing them. But the problem is, it was the oppression that made them like this. It was the complete lack of sympathy for what they are, as in contradistinction to what girls are, and therefore what women are, that has led us to this point. And the fact that they will never show the most tiny ounce of consideration is, to me, the most insufferable part. I hate this kind of person. I mean, the actress here is doing a superb job of portraying the kind of person that we're talking about. So there's genuinely a decent representation of reality here. And it's very, very frustrating because notice that this is about authority, right? This is about a challenge to authority and imposing authority on someone who is already being oppressed. If you look at the power structures involved with this, it is one person who has the law, the state, the institution itself of the school, the social capital behind them, and then you have, and is an adult, right? So has far greater life experience, and then you have a teenage boy who doesn't have anyone on his side, who doesn't know why all of this is happening, but knows that it feels bad to him. And his entire life is under the pressure cooker of you should be acting in a way that is contrary to your nature. And so anyway, you can see this in this scene. I'm not going to play any of it because I don't want to get copyright struck. But in this scene, the kid is losing his marbles, right? Because, again, this is a form of torture. He doesn't know how to respond, and so he becomes aggressive, potentially violent. And she just stares him down. Again, total lack of empathy towards a child, right? Stares him down, and then he kicks the thing, and at one point, a guy starts yelling from the background. One of the, beta gelding enforcers. It's just like, you better not do anything, or whatever, from the other thing. It's like, okay, stop. Why isn't he the one dealing with the boy? Why is she dealing with the boy? Why is someone like her, with no life experience that could relate to anything that he does, and who only understands the privilege of having institutional power over him and squeezing, why is she the one doing it? Because, I mean, again, this is a great representation of reality. I don't doubt that this has happened thousands of times in British schools up and down the country. We've got the boy just holding his head like, I don't know why they're treating me this way, and a woman who is desperately trying to impose a regime on him that he is by nature not equipped to live under. So the thing about these kinds of women is that they're left-wing, they're extremely liberal, they're very feminist, and therefore they come with all of the priors of liberalism and feminism, and they view someone who doesn't conform to them as being malevolent. They view them as being evil and malicious, whereas in fact, the reality is, well, liberalism is bollocks. It begins with a bunch of assumptions that are not true, and this is one of the responses of this. Because remember, this kind of young man, again, the young man accused of stabbing someone is the worst possible example, but there are lots of examples of young men who are not criminals, but who are just against the politically correct order, and that's why they watch Andrew Tate. He is a product of this system, because we have had this system for 20 plus years. This has been the ruling doctrine of Britain for all of that time. And so you can't say, well, he come from somewhere else. No, he's your problem. He's what you have created. And what your universal liberal system has created is a generation of young men who fucking hate this place. They hate you. They hate the institutions. They hate the country at large. They hate the way that they are treated. They hate everything. And this is why in America especially, but generally across the Western world, young men are very, very right-wing. So, gentlemen, well done. And it's the right thing to do. They're very right-wing because they understand that the system that has brought us to this position is incredibly left-wing, and it wants to do something bad to them. It fundamentally wants to kind of destroy them. And that's what's happening in this scene, where she's staring him down. What she's trying to do is break his spirit. She wants him to basically collapse, fold in on himself, start crying, break down. Any of the thymotic side of his soul, they want completely repressed. They want it gone. That's the part of the man they least understand and they feel is most dangerous to the matriarchal longhouse of the eternal feminist order. And they want to make all of society like this because they don't understand that there is justice in not being like this. And so it's a perpetual evil, a perpetual prison that young men are going to be trapped in because there's no escape from society. There's no escape from the law. It's everywhere. Wherever you go, there it is. This is why we don't have working men's clubs for men only now. There is no such thing as a male-only space anymore, unless it's by luck of self-association, because women just don't fancy going there. But if one woman wants to go there, they have to be able to go there, which of course changes the dynamic of everything. And so you've got men retreating into themselves and trying to just go by the rules-based order, even though by nature, that's not how these things actually should be. I mean, I don't know about you, right? But I remember being told off in this sort of way when I was a kid. It wasn't nearly this bad, though, because society wasn't geared to destroy men, right? It wasn't geared to destroy men, or turn them into pets, anyway. There was still some spirit in us. There was some life left in us. But I remember being in situations like this, and I hated it. I hated it. And I'm watching this, and I'm just thinking I've heard accounts from subscribers of mine, followers of mine, who've told me the things they've had to go through. And I always wonder, okay, would you want to do that? Or would you just prefer like 5 lashes on the back? Or like General Drill Sergeant Zim, right? And then, what would you rather take? And then be put back in the ranks and get back in line and then go and do your basic training or whatever. And I tell you what, I would have taken the 5 lashes on the back any day of the week than this kind of psychological torture. I hate this. And I'm not surprised. This is the sort of thing, men are going mental and they're worried that they're going to turn into a bunch of domestic terrorists because fundamentally you're not dealing with men as men. And what you're trying to do to them is make them the eternal prisoners of this social prison, of the longhouse, of the end of their maleness and manliness to which there is no escape. Like you're saying to them, no, you're going to be dominated by this feminized system forever if you comply with what we do. And we're going to make it so you have no choice but to comply. So what now? And you can see why they're worried. Well, hang on, what if some of them say, you know what? I'll choose the or what option, actually, and see where that goes. That's a pretty scary thing. And I don't think it's healthy. I don't want us to be presenting young men with a have your spirit broken or else options, right? I mean, one, why are we criminalizing our young men? Why are we treating them like animals, right? Why are we treating them like they are intrinsically bad and they've done something wrong by being young men? And the answer is, of course, we live in a feminist system that's run by a bunch of HR Haridans. But I don't think that's good. And I don't think we should do that. And I actually think that a bit of empathy for these young men might be a good idea. The second thing is young boys are not girls, right? They don't just want to be sat in a room. Like this might be the appropriate way for 2 women to deal with each other, right? So an older woman, a younger woman, they sit there and they she interrogates her, they explain their feelings, they have a cry, and they get. That's not how men do things. So for the young man, nothing is resolved here, right? Things are just worse. They just get worse and worse and worse. And so there's nothing, this doesn't fix anything. And I'm sure that the writer of this knew this, actually. But this, again, this is well portrayed in this, because you can see kind of her frustration. She's like, God, I don't know what I'm doing, really. No, you don't know what you're doing. What you should be doing is letting the men sort it out, because men will be dealing with this situation far better than you will, in ways that you'll never understand. And you'll never understand why they get results. Right? I mean, like, instead of this ever being a thing, right? What would have been more sensible is like the gym teacher or something making, as a punishment for whatever he's done or is accused of, making him do like a 5-mile run or something, right? Like making him do something physical. That's how men generally actually tend to resolve things. It doesn't have to be a fight, but if you want them to have actually learned something, doing something physical rather than processing emotions in this really weird cultist inquisitorial way. Sorry, I'll get to the super chats in a minute. Sorry, I just want to get through all of this first. Instead of going through this inquisitorial, and this genuinely seems like when I was reading that book, The Wrong Way Home, this is what the cults would do, right? They would process each other. So they would basically, like 15th century inquisitors, sit down and try and get contradictory stories and catch them in the loops and drag out everything they could from them. And it's a cruel thing to do. This doesn't solve any of the problems. Like, actually punish them and let them move on. Again, maybe not this case is a bad example, but this is not this is just the caricature example of this. There are lots of other examples of this being done normally. Scientology still does, exactly. So anyway, where was it? Yeah, there we are. So this has been a massive thing here, right? And so they say, and this is the common interpretation of this, right? Erin Doherty says that Netflix's one-shot show Adolescence takes aim at a terrifying subject matter: young men, sometimes children, being radicalized online by misogynists who encourage toxic attitudes towards women. It's there, we can't deny it, and no matter how awful and disturbing it is, we'd be doing ourselves a disservice as a human race to ignore it and avoid it. I think what the writers are doing, and all they can do, is highlight these issues and go, let's have a conversation. But I don't actually think the show poses any answers, and I don't think it can, because I don't think we have them yet. Right. Brilliant. That's a great admission, right? So we'll go into who's having this conversation, who's being invited into this conversation in a bit, right? But the show doesn't pose any answers, because the show would have to come to the logical conclusion that the system itself is failing young men. The system itself is a form of oppression against young men. The system itself is persecuting young men, and so the only solution would be to change the system. But the whole point of this system is to prevent misogyny. I mean, they literally say radicalized by misogynists. Okay, well, what does misogyny mean? What does misogyny mean in this context? Well, as far as I can tell, and they will just say, well, it's hatred of women. It's like, okay, but none of a lot of what happens is actually predicated on hatred of women. What it is the excessive power of women as a collective, right? Women as a group wield too much power over men as a group, and that's including young boys as well, in all regards, because we have adopted a liberal framework that suggests that actually fundamentally all human beings are the same. Again, disservice the human race, as if there's just one kind of human and we all fit into that category. But that's not true. Biologically, men and women are very different, and they respond to different incentives in different ways, and there are general patterns in this. And so it's just not allowed that we have the proper conversation that is there to resolve these issues. Now, one thing you might want to watch on YouTube, let me see if I can find it actually, because it's so good. It's so good. And I'm sure there we go. I'm sure I've brought this up before, right? So there's a, there we go, perfect screenshot. So there's a show called 7 Periods with Mr. Gormsby. Now this is a show from New Zealand from the early 2000s. And the whole thing's kind of a caricature. Mr. Gormsby is what I would assume like a British school teacher would be like during the British Empire, during like the Victorian era. And he's got to look after a classroom full of like dropout boys, right? The troublemaking boys. And you can see there he's got a cane in his hand and he regularly threatens and intimidates the boys with it. But by the end of this series, when Gormsby, because the staff from the school are all woke, they're all totally politically correct, and they're all just as vile and vicious as you might expect. The excessively woke male feminist type is, of course, cheating on his girlfriend, and he's, basically an emotional abuser. All of the other people are spineless and weak and can't fix any of the problems. And it's always up to Gormsby to actually fix the bloody problems, right? And by the end of it, his kids love him because he's got a class of all boys and they've only been confined in the feminist system, the matriarchal longhouse, the oppressive society, the whole lives. And Gormsby just treats them like men. And he sometimes being treated like a man means getting a whip. But he treats them with dignity, actually. He treats them with respect. And by the end of it, when he's fired, because, of course, he doesn't get on with the rest of the staff, and because it's set in New Zealand, and a lot of these are New Zealand indigenous Aboriginal Maori boys, they see him off by doing a haka in his honour. And it's an incredibly touching moment. It's a really, really beautiful thing. And it's one of those things where you think, right, okay, there was another way of doing these things, and we just aren't allowed to do them anymore. And what 7 Periods of Mr. Gormsby is a kind of swan song to that older way of doing things. This is how this is meant to work, and this is how these young men will respond to this. And what we're going to do is make sure there's no Gormsbys left in order to fully instantiate the system, and you end up with this. And it's just genuinely heartbreaking, frankly. And now they're sat there like, okay, we can't make it so that women's power as women doesn't encompass every domain, right? Because one of the things that you see about Mr. Gormsby, women have no power over his classroom, right? It's all men in the classroom, or young teenage lads in the classroom, and it's him. None of the women ever interfere in what Gormsby does with the lads, and he fixes them. He runs them like a military camp, basically, getting them to do various jobs, but he turns them into competent people who end up solving the school's problems that are broadly caused by woke. And so the only answer to misogyny is either you rescind the power of women in society. You say, right, there are areas of society where there ought not to be women, and there ought not to be female influence. And even if women like this HR Haridan don't understand that, that's tough shit. It's not your business. You're a woman, not a man, and you don't belong here. Or, and you can see why this paradigm is unacceptable to the feminist mind, the universal, liberal feminist who sat there going, no, we are all exactly the same and we're all exactly like me. Everyone's just like me, and therefore everyone will be like me. And I don't care how many young lads I have to torture in these interrogative struggle sessions to turn them into me. Or we change the system. Or, no, sorry, that's the change of the system is one thing. Or we censor. Or we just take away these young men's ability to even express themselves. And that's, of course, the route we're going to go down. Right? That's 100% the route we're going to go down. So you can see this is a wake-up call for parents. Oh, this is the Manosphere, the wake-up call. The BBC gets 25 million viewers. It's by far the largest media operation in Britain. And of course, you can see, oh, this is just evil Manosphere, where the male rage and misogynistic influences online could affect boys and young men's mental health. No. The mental health problems exist irrespective of the manosphere, the mental health crisis is upstream of the manosphere. The manosphere, quote unquote, is men's response to the circumstance they find themselves in. Andrew Tate is only possible because the system is so set against young men that they don't. I mean, why would they understand it? Why would they understand? Why am I being treated fundamentally like a criminal? Why am I being treated this way? Why am I being stigmatized in Netflix documentaries that then are being promoted by the BBC? Why are they all telling me that I'm a bad person just because I'm a man? And the answer is because that's what they think. That's genuinely what they think. So, this didn't stop there, of course. The creators of Netflix series Adolescence have said they want it to be shown in Parliament and schools, so it causes discussion and change. Sorry. Of course they do. Of course that's what they want, right? I've got to pause this because I don't want this getting me copyright struck. But this scene as well is particularly insufferable because she's totally, again, just totally. Oh, there's the guy yelling, the cucked enforcer, who should be the one dealing with this young man while he gets emotionally abused by the woman, right? It's insufferable. But of course, so they're like, oh, well, we want this to be a conversation about toxic influence and misogynist influences on teenage boys. It's like, okay, but you don't understand. They are the way that they are because you made them that way. They didn't begin as perfectly normal, feminist, kind, soft boys and then discover Andrew Tate. And Andrew Tate's, hey guys, do you want some misogyny? That's not how this works. You made them resentful of women because you were not respectful to them as men, or the men they intended to become, hypothetical men. Right? You made them what they are, and now we are treated to a bunch of menopausal HR Haridans who have decided, you know what we need to do? We need to just suppress everything masculine. We need to use the power of the state. Here's Annalise Midgley, MP. She blocked me from retweeted her. I retweeted her about this, saying, look, what she wants is a social prison for boys. And she's like, block. It's like, yep, there we go. That's literally the answer. She says she wants it to be broadcast in Parliament and schools. And they want to have everything that is pro-masculine removed from the internet. If it's not the kind of domesticated masculinity that menopausal woman Annalise Midgley would agree with, then it has to go. And I'm saying the words menopausal woman because that's literally all the people who are against actually dealing with this problem properly are. That's what they are. There's a consistent kind of person who's against this. And again, it's a completely unsympathetic one. And even when they're trying to be sympathetic, they're unsympathetic. But we'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, Starmer, of course, being the cucked feminist new man, was totally in favour of this. He's, oh, this is terrible. It's incel culture. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's not, though, right? Okay, look, it's just not. So this, they say, is this based on a true story? Yeah, of course it is. It's based on a true story. There was a woman, a 15-year-old girl called Elaine Andam, this was in London, stabbed to death by Hassan Sentamu. Right. I see. Well, why are young white boys so hateful? Now, I want to be clear, though. That is obviously the worst kind of misrepresentation and stigmatization of young white men. But the thing is, they are using this as a cipher for a real issue that they feel, right? I don't know why this young man, Hassan Senamtu, I can't pronounce his name, murdered a 15-year-old. I don't know why he did this. I don't think that that's actually what they're talking about, though, with any of this. What they're talking about is a kind of spiritedness in young men that don't want to be perpetually oppressed by a feminist order, and they need to stop it. And I mean, this, if you're worried about knife crime and possessions of weapons, well, if you break it down by race, I mean, there is a correlation here. But again, that's a bit of a side issue from what I think is the actual issue that they are raising. I'm not saying this isn't an issue, this is a massive issue. But this isn't why young white men are responding to the system with just pure hostility, right? Toby Young and Daily Skept have got a great post here. The boys in adolescence are constantly made to seem pathetic, childlike, and contemptible. Taken along with similar shows, it feels like a demoralization campaign against white British boys, says Laurie Wastell. Completely correct, but it's not just this. It's everything about the system. And it's because they are not allowed to have spaces where a HR Haridan cannot intervene and they can actually solve whatever issues and disputes they have as men. Right? This is how the model of masculinity was passed down from generation to generation. It was actually outside of the auspices of women. But the control freak HR Haridans, who are worried about any rollback of the absolute power and reign of the woman over the lives of these men, well, they need everything. Why? Because they don't have a husband. That's why, right? Women find safety and security in knowing that their husband is there to help them and save them, to bail them out. If someone were to get in their face or whatever, if something terrible happened, well, my husband will come and help me. I know my wife thinks this. I know my friends' wives thinks this. Well, if you're an unmarried, menopausal HR Haridan and you don't have a husband, well, you only have the state, don't you? And so you need to make sure the laws, the institutions, the schools, the prefects, all of the people who make up the guardian class of society are all on patrol in a pro-woman way or else. And that means complete control over any space, and men may not have anything of their own. And so you get, again, the kind of cucked, like absolutely ballless men like Gareth Southgate going, well, I hate the callous toxic influences harming young men. No, the harm has been done, right? The harm has already been done. The reason that Andrew Tate or anyone else like him can find any purchase among young men and why they're going so right-wing is because of the damage that the system is doing by giving them a lack of respect and recognition as to what they are. If we were to recognize that young men are young men, young women are young women, and I'm telling you, right, when I was at school, there were things that were for men only and for women only, right? When we played rugby, we didn't have women playing rugby with us. I don't know if they have women playing rugby with the boys now, but like we at least, I mean, I actually could check, and I suspect that they don't. But that's not because they shouldn't, right? In their minds, it's only because, well, the young girls would object or something like this. But there's no social place away from women now, right? There's nowhere that men can go to be men, and women can go to be, I'm sure there probably are places where women go to be women, but there aren't for men. And so the damage has been done, right? The ability to transmit the kind of culture, reproduce the kind of culture that was actually dignified for men has gone, right? Now you've got the Andrew Tate type of man being the only kind of man in the public sphere, as far as you can perceive, because he rejects the system entirely, right? Because any part of the system is so totalizing over the lives of these young men that the only option is to reject it entirely. And so now, they're just toxic influencers who are harming young men by making young men into misogynists. It's like, well, if you didn't have a totalitarian, domineering form of society that you were trying to trap them in like a prison, maybe they wouldn't be doing this. And like I said, the only people who are actually coming out to discuss this are menopausal women. It's so bizarre. This was on Channel 4, where Caitlin Moran, she doesn't actually say that toxic masculinity is joyless and depressing. She actually says something a little bit different. But the thing is about Caitlin Moran is she's trying to be sympathetic, right? She's trying to be sympathetic. But her problem is her life is so profoundly different to the life of a young boy and then man that she doesn't understand what drives them. She doesn't understand what it is they're looking for. She doesn't understand, therefore, how to help them. And of course, Kathy Newman here being her interlocutor, you can imagine how much empathy Kathy Newman shows to the situation. But I mean, literally it begins. So, Caitlin, what about men? Why do you think that so many young men are drawn to this kind of Andrew Tate misogyny? Well, I'm really hoping that a combination of Southgate's talk tonight and is going to be the moment that we get past this, is basically what she says. He's had a monopoly over information. Andrew Tate has not had a monopoly over information to boys, right? You have the monopoly over information. The feminist system has the monopoly over information. Andrew Tate's been deplatformed from everything. It's only Rumble and Twitter that let him back on because they are run by Americans who are free speech absolutists. You guys deleted Andrew Tate from everything. And all you do every day is vilify him. Now, again, I don't know that he's not a bad guy. I'm sure he's a fucking bad guy. But you make him into that kind of Goldstein figure. We're going to have 2 minutes of hate against him now. We're not going to have him defend himself. We're not going to try and speak to the issues that drew people to him in the first place. No, he's just Goldstein. You have to hate. And if you don't have the 2 minutes of hate, well, then you're part of the problem, aren't you? But she says, when I started writing my book about boys, I went to the bookshop. I went to the men's section so I could start researching men. There isn't one. No bookshop has a men's section. No shit. No shit. You know, about 60, 70 years ago, I bet they fucking had one, though. You know, boys' own books and stuff like this. They had those. And guess who fucking took them away, Caitlin? Guess who couldn't have anything outside of women's control, without women's influence, without having a woman in it? Guess who did that, Caitlin? Fuck's sake, man. Again, even when they're trying to be empathetic, they can't help themselves but not understand they are the problem, right? You shouldn't be on TV talking about this because you're a woman. You're a middle-aged woman. You're a grey-haired woman. You don't know anything about this subject. You are not the appropriate person to deal with this subject. Neither is Kathy Newman, and for some reason, this is the discussion. And it gets worse. We'll get into it in a minute. It gets worse. Because again, like I said, I don't think Caitlin Moran is a bad person. I think she's trying to empathize and trying to be like, you know, guys, we need a feminism for men. But she's so blind by the privilege that she has been bequeathed by our society that she doesn't realize that even in this, she is promoting a form of oppression for them. But anyway, she says there aren't any other people giving boys advice. And my problem with the man, well, go on. Look, okay, why doesn't the BBC have a man's hour or something, right? What I mean, like, one of the things like Joey Barton's constantly complaining about women in football. That used to be it, right? That used to be where men would go to do man stuff. And now they've got female commentators all the place. And there are loads of men who just like, I don't really want women's opinion on football because, you know, I know they don't play football. You know, I know they haven't been professional footballers in the men's leagues. They don't really know what they're talking about. They find it objectionable. And yet, even there, they can't even have their own space there. There's just nothing, right? Everything in society has been stripped away. But anyway, so the problem is just the Manosphere and Andrew Tate, right? But she says the whole thing's built around being hench, earning money from cryptocurrency pyramid schemes and blaming everything on wokery and mouthy women. But that's not useful information for boys. No, but it might be real, right? It might be real, and it might be really what's happening to them. And because that it seems to accurately represent reality. That seems to have really been what has happened. Like, HR menopausal Haridans have come along and used woke ideology to strip away the man's dignified domain in society. And it's not wrong for men to want recognition as men, to have dignity as men, to have a part of the world that is exclusively theirs and not yours. But you couldn't have that. We've been through these arguments. We've been through these conversations all through the 80s and 90s. We had these conversations, and then the 2000s, we'd lost it. That's what it's come down to. The men of that generation, I was a bit young, to be honest, at those points, but I remember these conversations going on TV. Like, those men then completely buckled. They completely lost the argument. Oh, the dangerous books for boys. That's right. Russian. I'll get those up. I love these so much. Hal Golden. Yeah, I remember getting these. Con and Hal Golden. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get these for my sons. Again, you just don't get this kind of thing now. I'm sure I could find a copy of it, obviously, but like, it's not in schools, it's not in libraries. You don't. It's not something is easy to find in bookshops. Like, you go into a bookshop now and it's tragic. But anyway, she said, Kathy Newman says, what do you say when people always say to me, well, it's feminism and all the focus on girls' rights that push boys away? There's nothing for them. It's all about you. What's your response to that? It's like, okay, yeah, what is that response? Because that's obviously true. If even Kathy Newman is like, well, I mean, we have basically stigmatized young men for the last 40 odd years, and now we're worried that they're turning into terrorists, right? Like, what do we do about that? And she says, it's always amazing because it predicates the idea that the internet is 1 inch long. There's no space for people to talk about these things. What do you think the Manosphere is, Caitlin? That's what the Manosphere is. That space that men have carved out for themselves to deal with masculine issues that you can't understand definitionally because you're a woman, right? That's what it's, and all you can do is stigmatize it and go, well, yeah, entertain the Manosphere, they're evil. It's like, okay, well, they're also the coping mechanism that young men use to try and make it to the end of the day in the society that favors you and oppresses them, right? That's what this is about. She says, there's room for everyone to talk about these things. Again, there would be if you didn't constantly deplatform them, if you didn't constantly censor them, if you didn't constantly demonize them. I think there's been some, I love this. I think there's been some truth in that. So correct then. It is correct that feminism has literally stigmatized and marginalized boys for being boys, right? Caitlin admits, yep, that's true. And Caitlin Moran, is a feminist. She's been part of this for decades now. She's been promoting this. She's had loads of books about this. She does tours about this. She has been exactly part of the problem. And so, yeah, I think there's some truth in that. Well, that was fucking cruel, wasn't it? Because if I thought I was taking away things from someone, I would try and be a little bit sympathetic to that. I can't imagine being so belligerent that you can stigmatize someone for decades and decades and decades, take everything they have, and be like, yeah, I think we were doing that. I mean, that's really selfish. That's really cruel. That's a horrible thing to have done. And I would feel like a total piece of shit had I done that. Had I been literally, to come to the point where I'm literally admitting that we've essentially taken the rights away from boys and given them to girls. And if it was the other way around, I'd be like, yeah, no, I think women need their own spaces. Women deserve to have their own things. Women should have a domain of life that has nothing to do with me because I'm not a woman and I don't understand it. I don't know how it's appropriate to behave in these ways. And my very presence there as a member of the opposite sex changes the nature of the environment. And that's whenever you have an all-woman environment or an all-male environment, it has a particular character. And as soon as you drop in one man or one woman, the whole thing changes and it's completely different. Right? And everyone knows that. But she says, for the last decade, feminism has been so huge that girls are all the time hearing the future is female. Here are 50 role models from the past. Women can do everything. Yeah, I mean, imagine being a man, a young boy, and hearing nothing but praise for half of the human race and then condemnation for the other half. And you happen to fall into the other half. Boys won't have heard that. Well, that's right, they won't have heard that. What a fucking horrible thing to do to children, right? What a horrible thing to do to children. Essentially say, no, you don't have a future. Your future is a wage slave, right? Your future is serving women. Your future is serving females. That's your fucking future. Enjoy. Like, it's a cruel thing to do. It's genuinely horrible. Anyway, when was the last time you saw the opposite, of course? And the answer is never, and you can't, because that would be considered male supremacy, that would be considered misogynistic, blah, 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 right? And so she's like, well, where are your male role models? Yeah, exactly. Where are the male role models? It's not like Hollywood has spent the last 30 odd years emasculating every single male role model that they put up. Like, even Thor. Like, I saw a clip of Thor going around the other day. I was like, and I tweeted out, is this real or is this AI? And I was like, no, this is real. Because it was so fucking embarrassing, so fucking pathetic. So, oh God, why 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 would normies want to watch this? I guess they don't, which is why the theatre business is going down, the cinema business is going down. But like, it's so bad that, and the victory of these feminists is so complete that now they're like, where are the men that we've destroyed so utterly? Why don't they have any of their own things? That's a great question. It's a great question. But anyway, where are the male role models? And they can't name one other than Gary Southgate. I think it's Gareth Southgate, yeah, not Gary Southgate. But do you consider him to be a role model? I consider him to be fucking gelding. I don't like him at all. I fucking don't like him in any way, shape, or form. I don't want my son to turn out like a weak man like this. I want my son to be able to fight in his own cause, because no one else is going to. Right? And so Caitlin, I've got two sons, but you know, my 4-year-old isn't quite in that frame yet. He's not old enough. But anyway, she says this, right? Fat girls sat on the beach in a bikini with their rolls and stretch marks out and took a selfie and put it online. Body positivity. And all their friends went, you slay queen, blah, 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 right? Okay, first things first. I don't think women should be doing that, but whatever. If a fat boy posted a picture of himself in his trunks with his rolls out, there would be either complete silence from his friends, or his friends would be going, is there something wrong with you? Right, Caitlin, you're not a fucking boy, right? You don't know what they would say. This is not what boys would say to one another. This is a prime example of how you don't know what you're talking about. No, they wouldn't go, nothing, complete silence, and they wouldn't go, is there something wrong with you? They go, you fucking beached whale put on a top. He would get roasted by his friends. It's so bizarre watching menopausal women talk about what teenage boys are like. You don't know. I was a teenage boy. I know exactly what they're bloody well like, and they don't respond like this. But you don't know, and you don't care to know. You think you're doing something good, but you're not. Boys don't know how to cheerlead each other and be fans of each other in the way that girls do, because they're not fucking girls. You don't know what they are. You don't know what makes them tick. You don't know what makes men men. And what being a boy, when you're going through the process of growing into a man, what it's supposed to do to you in order to turn you into what you are not yet. How to frame it? In order to craft you into the thing that you will become, that women will like, women will be attracted to, your fellow men will respect, will be able to master things in the real world. Because I mean, like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of Caitlin Moran's comedy or if you've read any of her books. She's shit. She's absolutely shit. If she were a man, she would be a nobody. She would have nothing. No one would listen to her. No one would care about what she has to say. But she's not a man, and so the world is stacked slightly differently for her. But anyway, Kathy Newman says, so there's got to be an equivalent of sisters doing it for themselves. Oh, you don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want that. Because that's what Andrew Tate is. That's what Andrew Tate is. What are you talking about? This is what Andrew Tate is. You're asking for Andrew Tate. You just don't know because you're expecting them to be like women. You're expecting them to be girls. That's what you're expecting. She says here, there's something so pessimistic and dark about the manosphere. To you. To men, they find it nurturing. They find solace in this. They act in the way that they want to act as men, and you're like, oh god, that's pessimistic and dark. So, oh yeah, trust us, right? Go read Nora Vincent's Self-Made Man, all right? We know you don't know what it is to be a man, and all I think we're asking for is for you to accept that you don't know, right? Just admit you don't know. Stop torturing teenage boys. You don't know. Come to someone else who does know. Just go to someone else. Anyway, she says, if you go onto any of these Manosphere websites and talk about your mental health and say you're thinking about taking your own life, boys will respond by posting emojis of nooses and knives. Right, so why did you say there'd be complete silence from his friends, or they'd be going, what's wrong with you? They don't do that. You know they don't do that. You were just speaking from a woman's perspective. You thought that's what you would want the women to do, or think the women would do. But anyway, she says, this is such a toxic and dark environment for boys to be in. There's no joy in the way we have for girls. And that's because you expect the joy that boys would find in being together and enjoying their own social environment to be the same as for girls in their own social environment. And that's not true. Boys are very rude to one another to their faces and very loyal when they're behind their back. Are girls like that, Caitlin?
or is it the other way around? You and I both know that's the case. And you and I both know that there's a portion of women who are the worst misogynists in the world. Genuinely can't stand other women because of this two-facedness. You know, boys, men, we're rude to each other to our faces. You know, if we want to roast you, we'll roast you, and everyone will laugh, and then we'll go away and be like, defend each other's honor. You know, if someone insults one of my friends when they're not there, I'll defend them, obviously. You know, do women do that? Or do they join in and go, oh yeah, I've always hated that bitch. Fucking hate this. I hate this so much. Like this reign of the matriarch has got to end. Yeah, it's all good character building. It's all good character building, right? And it really bothers me because I'm okay. You know, I'm fine. I'm doing all right. But I'm not currently trapped in a matriarchal school. You know, my sons are, right? You know, I'm not the one who has currently got the soft oppression of the matriarch in the longhouse over me. You know, this, and it's, I don't want this to break the spirit of my sons. That's fundamentally what this comes down to. I don't want this to break the spirit of my sons, or your sons, or anyone else's sons. You know, I think this just it's a very difficult injustice to characterize, right? Is most people don't have the words required and don't have the perceptions of what is happening to properly characterize what is happening here. And it's only because I've been doing this for a decade that I can even come close to describing the kind of elemental, like intrinsic oppression that this is on the basis of sex, you know, on the basis of intrinsic characteristics. Anyway, they carry on and they just, you know, 10 years ago it was awful for women. No, it wasn't. 10 years ago it was not awful for women. And it's so much better now. Yeah, I bet it's way better to have all of the governmental and all of the institutions of power on your side and pressing down on everyone else for you, right? I bet that's the same. But she's like, we can do the same for boys. Like, no, you want to try and turn them into girls. Not having it. Not fucking having it. Anyway, then we were treated to BBC Newsnight. I think I can play this without getting copyright struck. Let's see.
What may sound like a weird question. When was the last time you cried?
So that's Victoria Derbyshire, menopausal woman. Why aren't you crying? Why aren't you crying like a girl? I don't understand why you're not crying. And this guy's just like, well, I don't really remember the last time I cried because, of course, we don't want to cry, right? Crying as a man is not an honourable or noble or sympathetic thing to do. It's fun. Don't get me wrong, it happens, you know. But when it happens, it's understood by other men that this is a lapse in strength. Right? And it's happened to the best of us. Like, you know, I cried when my best friend died when I was 27, right? I burst out like a fucking baby, right? I'm sure I'll cry at my dad's funeral, even though my dad didn't cry at his dad's. You know, I feel like I've disappointed him. But everyone knows there's a momentary lack of strength, and you don't hold it against him unless you hate the guy for some reason, you know, but you understand why you don't want to. Whereas she's like, well, why don't you cry? I'm a woman. We're okay to cry. No one is critical of a woman when she cries. In fact, it's encouraged. In fact, crying gets me the things that I want. It gets me all this attention, gets the problem solved. So why don't you cry? And it's because it doesn't work the same way. It doesn't work like that for men. It just doesn't happen. Nobody respects a crying man. Nobody's sympathetic to a crying man. Nobody wants to be around a crying man, so men don't cry. And you know what? That's fine. That's totally fine. But don't expect that they should. Anyway, so this I've seen going around, and apparently this is a counterterrorism video. And it's about 3 minutes long, and 3 minutes is a long time for a clip. And I don't know that it won't get me copyright struck, but I'm going to play it anyway, because I think it is actually important. Because what this does is represent from the shitlib point of view, the sort of gelded man, domestic man point of view, the kind of person that they think is going to become a terrorist. You know, this is the sort of person that I suppose that David Betts is in a roundabout way referring to when he's saying, well, look, a civil war might be coming, so there's a problem there. These are the people that they're talking about. Let's watch this.
Let's get started. This is Mr. J, a young man of 17. He lives with his parents in the county of Hogshire. He is known to his local nature reserve staff, as he often uses the bird hides and public viewing areas there. He is quiet and withdrawn and very rarely speaks to staff, but is polite when he does so.
Right, so he's a normal English kid, right? He's a normal English kid in the Shires, and he's just like living his life as normal. He's introverted, but he's of course polite because he's English and well-bred, and he's just being normal.
He is known to attend the local college and has taken part in organised activities at the nature reserve as part of his college course.
Right, so he's not a total shut-in, he's normal. Quick look at the demographics of the college course there. Anyway.
Nature reserve staff become concerned after noticing the contents of some leaflets which have been left in the viewing hides on the reserve.
Oh.
These contain anti-immigration views and argue that British tradition and identity is under threat from multiculturalism, and that Islam is fundamentally opposed to British values.
Well, I mean, are any of those points wrong? So what we have here is a young man who's like, my country is changing, and I don't think this is good, actually. I actually think that British traditions are acceptable because I'm English and I live in England, and this is the appropriate place for them. It seems that multiculturalism, as in the introduction of a bajillion people from all around the world, are actually making my identity marginalised and making the nature of what it is to be English. They're eroding it by the fact that they're so overwhelming in number. And of course, Islamic values are not British values because they're fundamentally alien to this land. They didn't develop here. Ours didn't develop in concordance with theirs. They have definitely got a conflict. These seem based and true, and actually the responsible thing to do is bring this up, right? You would be like, okay, if this was a normal system, go back 100 years, if no one was bringing this up, everyone would be like, oh God, we hadn't noticed. That's a great point. God, we better do something about this. But no, not under the matriarchal, multicultural, liberal Longhouse. No, now this, right, he's not on board with the program. He's not on board with the infinite power of women. He's not on board with the unlimited numbers of immigrants. He's not on board with mosques going up everywhere over the country. Right, he's the problem. And even in the most calm, introverted, polite young man, they are worried about the spirited part of the soul bursting forth and doing something terrible.
Values. Staff also find stickers on litter bins in the reserve. These contain similar slogans and statements to the leaflets.
Again, are they wrong?
A review of CCTV cameras shows that it is Mr. J who has placed the stickers and leaflets in the reserve. When questioned, he admits his actions, but is defensive and uncooperative.
Notice who's questioning him. Notice who is fucking questioning him. As I said, this is a perennial thing that is happening up and down this country, with the HR Haridan lecturing some young man who is in any other time and place would be considered to be the very model of what it might be to be a young man in England. And now he is the problem. And now he is getting a dressing down, an interrogation, processing by the goddamn HR Haridan, who's, I'm guessing, is menopausal. like this is a real thing that's happening across this country. But also, notice the total lack of empathy for this guy's position. Like, is there anything true about this? Like, immigrants are definitely the problem when it comes to the transport system, right? Like, the roads are packed to bursting. The trains are packed to bursting. The housing costs unbelievable amounts of money. Like, if your children are ever able to afford a house, that's because they became wildly successful in something. They're not going to be able to get a normal job and get a normal house in a city, right? British identity is under threat from multiculturalism. Let me find a thing that I retweeted earlier, just 'cause it was comical. Absolutely comical. This is Mehdi Hassan and Nish Kumar. Now, I think he's Pakistani and he's Indian. And they're debating who gets to be English. You and I are not English. Are you sure we're not English? Yeah, it looks like the British identity is under threat, doesn't it? Right? It looks like it actually is under threat. It's one of those things where you just have to admit that, in fact, what it is to be British has been brought into question by mass immigration and multiculturalism. Obviously true, because I mean, like, if Islamic values are the same as British values contain Islamic values, how do we square that circle with all of the other things that Islamic values contradict and would override, and in fact seem deeply offensive too from that perspective? You can't just have everything under one umbrella. These things are going to cause problems. But anyway, let's carry on.
Leaflets in the reserve. When questioned, he admits his actions, but is defensive and uncooperative.
Again, uncooperative. Well, shouldn't you just admit you're a fucking terrorist, Mr. J?
Staff at the Nature Reserve are concerned with the content of what Mr. J is distributing and believe he may be vulnerable and or susceptible to being radicalised.
Or maybe if the system itself wasn't so set against him and wasn't currently destroying his culture, his history, his way of life, and stigmatising him as a young man, this wouldn't be the problem.
They make a prevent referral and they include images of the stickers and leaflets.
Straight to the terrorist group. The anti-terrorist groups.
Once assessed, it is decided that channel support is appropriate.
Again, look who's doing this. Ultimately, it's the HR lady. This time, a HR lady of colour. And the bunch of cuckolds sat around. The geldings. Like, you see the problem.
A counterterrorism case police officer is assigned and visits.
Oh God, great. Another HR Haridan to process me in her cult-like indoctrination. I'm so thrilled. I mean, I love that they can't help but portray the problem when because they think this is good, right? Oh, we're promoting diversity and empowering women. It's like, yeah, you can't help but reveal the problem in your own propaganda.
It's the family along with a social worker from Children's Services. Mr. J admits that he has been spending more and more time online looking at discussion forums.
You know, like Caitlin Moran said, why don't you go online and talk about these problems with other men? Yeah, we do.
He explains that at first he just discussed history and fantasy computer games with other users.
You were playing Total War, weren't you? You were playing Bannerlord, weren't you? Prevent are going to be banging down my door.
But he was then encouraged to visit other sites which shared anti-immigration, anti-Islam and anti-Semitic and far-right views and conspiracy theories.
I like the way they have to tack that on. Like, anti-Semitic and far-right views and conspiracy theories. It's like, what, pro-Palestine marches? I don't think he's going on those.
Conspiracy theories. He says that he's been feeling very low.
Look at his fucking school! Look at his fucking school! Like, no one like him around.
Lonely.
I imagine he feels very lonely, depressed and directionless at college. There's no one like him there.
Depressed and directionless at college, but he feels like he has friends and a shared purpose amongst some of the users on these forums.
I'm sure there's more to it than that, but that's the only clip I had. So anyway, like, you can see the problem, right? And so the only things that we ever hear from these people, and again, Ava Santina from the Politics Joe podcast is a great example of the kind of HR Haridan, whose only solution then is, and this is just, she's just one example among many, is censorship. We have to prevent Mr. J from ever being able to actually talk to those people online, right? the influencers who they want to watch, the people like me, Andrew. I don't know. Do I count? I imagine I count. Like whoever, right? No, they can't. They're not allowed web presence. They can't. Certainly not allowed to make a living doing what they do. They should be demonetized. Blah 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 blah. In all to protect this system that is a perpetual prison for boys, a perpetual state of oppression that they may never escape, but never even have the concept of escape. So even if they look around online, they're like, "Oh wow, no one else feels this way. There's no one who talks about these issues." At least in a way that that would resonate with me. There's nothing out there, is their answer. Make it a total and enclosed system that they can't ever escape. And presumably they'll just end up killing themselves over. Like, that's what she's asking for. And it's so awful. It is so awful. The idea that what children expect to making it so that the men can't escape from the indoctrination is a profound evil. Again, they just can't understand how evil what they're suggesting is, because they've never been through anything like this. They can't even imagine why you would object to this, because this is the world how they would want it for themselves. And you have got to accept that. But anyway, like I retweeted this and said, the purpose of everything the left wants is to ensure that young men are the perpetual inmates of a social prison built by and run by women, and Zoomers must reject this wholeheartedly and sincerely. You are free men and you must act like it. This is important, I think, and honestly, I think the Zoomers are doing a good job in rejecting this. They seem to have been sufficiently turned to the right, which is good news. Well done, gentlemen, right? But this, you have to have a very clear knowledge and conception of what is happening and what you are against, right? Because this isn't going away. This is going to be a long struggle to be able to have something that they don't have power over, right? It's going to be very difficult to get this. I'd be shocked if I see it in my lifetime, frankly. But who knows? 20 years, maybe a Zoomer uprising, based Zoomer uprising, and they're just like, you know what? Who knows? Who knows where we are? But right. President Lemon says, watching you and building some Warhammer minis. Oh, that's awesome. Just a quick thing. I actually managed to get the new Exarch for the Warp Spiders. Finally, the Warp Spiders have got an Exarch. Haven't managed to get any of the new Warp Spiders yet, but I'm currently building that. Femboy Fantasia says, C.S. Lewis predicted this in The Abolition of Man. Yeah, he did. He wasn't quite as specific as what is happening now, but the general themes that we're seeing are completely true. The feminization of society has been an absolute catastrophe for boys, and this kind of totalitarian perspective on everything is just, I just can't stand it. I just can't stand it. I genuinely hate to see it. And I really think that young women now, think about the kind of men you want to date, right? Think about the kind of man you want to marry, right? Is it some gelding, or is it a man who knows himself to be a man, recognizes himself as a man, and is prepared to act as a man? And so it's in your interests too. Jordan Peterson makes this point very well. Like, it's in your interests to make sure that men have their own domain in which they can be men, for you to find someone you want to marry and fall in love with later on. Nurture, Generica says, nurture might be the word for the kind of grace that women ought to show. The reason you didn't think of it is because we don't see it in modernity. Yeah, good point. That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Blueberry says, sorry to be super pride flag, but Jordan Peterson equals Jedi Andrew Tate equals Sith David Groggins equals Grey J masculinity equals Force. If anyone has a better analogy, please. I don't know who David Groggins and Grey J are. But there is a fundamental thread that goes between Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, and it's not that they're the same men, but it is that they are sympathetic to the issues of men. That's what it comes down to, right? Generica says, your assumption there is that this woman is acting. She isn't. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, it's difficult to know. Sad Wings Raging says, estrogen, a weapon of mass disruption. Yep. Well, the thing is, in all of the times and places, we just didn't allow women to have unlimited power over society. Right? There were areas of society that were for men and for women, and that's how it ought to be. Places where women simply didn't have authority. And now women have authority over everything, in every system. And look at what they're talking about. Oh, these teenage boys, I'm worried they're going to be terrorists. And it's like, well, I mean, you're not worried about the third world imports you brought who are a measurable, like they are much more likely to commit sexual assaults or anything like that. You don't care about any of that. You care about the straight white men who might not want to continue with the dispossession of them from their own heritage, right? That's what you want. And the idea that they can't be men, or they can't be British, or they can't be English, they can't be, they can't do these things because otherwise some menopausal woman will be breathing down their neck and saying that's misogynist, that's exclusive, blah, blah, blah. That's Andrew Tate. Like that, like you're not worried about the actual danger, right? You're not worried about the actual danger. Anyway, Mr. Blueberry again says, I feel the current trajectories, women will become second-class citizens again, either by fed-up Western Christian and secularist men or MENA Islamic men successfully taking over before the year 2100. Yeah, well, I mean, when Islam takes over, I'm just going to convert. I'm just going to convert. But yeah, okay, fine, I'm a Muslim now. Get your burqa on. I'm going to become an Islamic enforcer. You got to wear the burqa. Davey says, that point just spoke to me. I remember my reflection point in 2012 in college. I had a choice, left or right, but it wasn't that cut or dry. No, but that's what it boiled down to, right? That's when you look back in retrospect, of course, it's not like as clear as what I'm making it here, but you can tell that is essentially what this was, and you had to decide. And I guess the fact that you're here means that you decided for the men, for masculinity. Oraz says, endorsing the masculinity crisis psych premise and letting institutional feminists win the role of saviors of the male mind is the worst mistake the right ever made. Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. I don't think women can be the saviors of men. Again, I refer you to 7 Periods of Mr. Gormsby. I'll probably do a more deep dive on this at some point because it's genuinely worth it. Like, there's so much male psychology in there and you can see how this has to be done, basically, through it. It's a really, really great show. But yeah, the right, and women on the right as well, should be looking to the men on the right and say, no, you need to be someone who, in a sort of like mentorship way, deals with younger men, right? You have to be that guy. And because that's our role, right? As older men, that's our fucking role in life. We're meant to be showing the younger guys around us, teach them what right from wrong is. And if we don't do that, well, they end up like gay Zoomers, don't they? Anyway, Cogbjorn says, when I was in high school, the principal would call you to his office, sit you down, and you had a choice. Do community service or get suspended. I did a lot of hard labor in high school, and I think it helped. Yes, exactly. Men need something physical as their punishment. Like being interrogated for 5 hours by a menopausal woman is not it. That does not help. That makes things worse. Nothing is solved there. And again, women don't understand why men fight to resolve issues, but I don't even know if we can explain it to them, frankly. But they just need to understand that it has to be physical for us to get over whatever the problem is, right? It has to be something physical. And I know they don't understand, but men are much more physical creatures in this regard. Just let us be what we are, please. Imperius says, did you make sure to remind everyone that the boy in this story is based on who's black? Yes, yeah, I got to it. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter because that's not really what this is about. I get the feeling that the boy that it's based on is a different issue altogether, right? The issue that they have is men revolting against the feminist system. I think that boy was revolting against the feminist system because he's not white. And so the system is also calibrated to advantage him. So anyway. Sorry, I don't know why my throat's so scratchy today. Haz Knuckles says, my wife and I just had our first child 3 months ago. Congratulations. Our son will not be entering the public school system because of this. Thank you for bringing this to people's attention. Well, I don't really have that choice in Britain. I don't even know if we can do that, to be honest. But I'm doing my best to fight against the feminist indoctrination. Like, for example, again, at school, I've told the story before, but like, unironically, the headmistress of the school, or like not the headmistress, but like I don't know, deputy headmistress or something. She you know, that my son was very clearly instructed. Well, if someone hits you, you're not allowed to hit them back. You've got to go tell the teacher. And I just said to my son, no, if someone hits you, you will hit them back, and we'll settle the difference afterwards. You know, I won't punish you for striking someone back. As long as he threw the first punch, I'm not going to punish you for that. And I have had this argument with the school, and because I pay for their school, they back down. Like, my son's a lovely kid as well. My oldest son's a lovely kid, and he never starts fights, but I'm damn well teaching him to finish them. Avikin says, you will process your emotions that I decided you have in the way that I decide is best until you come to the conclusion that I want. Yeah, I as a woman who doesn't understand what it is to be a young man. Not just because I haven't had that life experience, because I'm biologically wired in a different way. I can't understand. The Last Russian says, Christina Hoff Summers and Warren Farrell onto the podcast. You know, I met Warren Farrell at the art conference, and he was the one person I kind of was like, oh, wow, I'm so pleased to meet you, you know, because I really, really respect the work he's done over the years. Same with Christina, of course, but Warren's been in the trenches for decades, when it was super unpopular, when no one was even vaguely sympathetic to the point. And he was a lovely guy, really lovely guy. Exactly as sort of gentle as you'd expect as well. Oraz says, it's uniquely evil to redefine male problems as an internal confusion related to masculinity, but that the narrative is the consensus adopted by both the left and the right. Very few people reject the premise. Yeah, it's not an internal confusion, of course. It's external. The problems are that men are not allowed to authentically be men. And this is a real issue, and I'm not happy with it at all. Russian says, the Gynopticon will come for every white British male. The Gynopticon. That's good. That's good. I like that. Generica says, Christopher Hitchens used to say it was uniquely cruel for a religion to tell people they were created sick and command them to be well. Feminism is the worst religion to do this. You know, there's a clip of Christopher Hitchens dealing with some Australian female journalist where Christopher Hitchens is like an arch leftist as well, but he always had this kind of traditional underpinning to everything that he did. And she's saying, well, why doesn't your wife work? Why won't you let your wife work? And Christopher Hitchens is like, well, no, wife of mine will have to work. And she said, well, you don't think she should be able to work? It's like, well, women can work, but my wife won't have to work. Right? Because what he's saying there is, I as a man will make sure that I am a provider to my wife. So this is not a burden placed upon her. So she, of course, can raise her children or whatever, right? And I remember like being a liberal atheist, back in the day. But that, like, ringing in the back of my mind, being like, yeah, no, that is correct. You know, I don't mind if women work, obviously, you know, blah, 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 but my wife won't have to work. I'm a lot more right-wing now. I forbid my wife from getting a job. I'm quite lucky because she doesn't want to get a job. But that means I have to just give her as much money as she asks for, which is not great. But but I don't particularly need money for anything because I don't really buy anything. The odd Warhammer figure is about the most I spend money on. So, but yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's right. You know, and another thing as well, like, women don't understand that if you have everything, women, then you don't need a man for anything, right? You don't have a man to look up to. You don't have a man to rely on. Then you're going to be alone. You're going to find men not very attractive. This is why the average woman isn't really attracted to the average man anymore, because she doesn't need anything from him. And so there's nothing, he's got to be a super good looking guy and on a sort of deep, primal, biological level for her to need him, or else she'll never find herself attracted to him. And that's really sad, actually. That's going to consign a lot of women to loneliness. But anyway, the Geth says, can we get an inverse template of a 40s white man sitting across from a teenage girl who got doing something sexual with a classmate in the bathroom? I mean, we could, but we're never going to see it. And even then, that would be inappropriate too. Right? That would be wrong as well. Book of Dark says, your amount and message will be public. I think you were meant to send an actual text in that. Russian says, the dangerous book for boys, yeah. Lou says, lady sideline reporters have fantastic... No, come on. Now's not the time for that. Sad Wings Raging says, get off your keister and write the book of dadism. I will. It's like, I've got a lot to do before I can do that, but I am doing it, so it will happen. Fox Under the Box says the BBC used to have Top Gear and Doctor Who. Yeah, that's true. Although Doctor Who's always had a very large female audience, but Top Gear was a great example. Avikin says representation matters. Now they mad. We agree. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now they've got to. Well, we need good representation for young men. It's like you can't have it. You've taken it away. You've destroyed it. You're never going to see it again. Cowboy Curtis says, just kicking up my percentage to Don Carlos. Keep fighting the good fight, boss. Got to save Britain. Thank you very much, sir. I'm meant to salute like that, I think, as an Englishman. Anyway, Tiny Conspiracy says, before joining the stream, the thumbnail and title immediately made me think of the movie My Dinner with Andre. This is the feminist version, isn't it? I've never seen My Dinner with Andre, so I can't tell you. But I just, there's a reason that this has annoyed everyone. And there's a reason that it's terrifying the feminist establishment. Again, they're trapped in 2014. As far as they're concerned, feminism has not changed. Feminism is the true religion of the British establishment. Two Tail says, a few years ago, my mum and I owned The Illustrated Art of Manliness and acted disgusted. My mum saw I owned it and acted disgusted that such a book even existed. She snapped at me asking what it's about. Good book, by the way. Again, that's this kind of HR menopausal Haridan. Like, why wouldn't you want your sons to be manly? Like, I doubt my wife's ever going to snap at my kids for being like that. Like, because I'm quite forthright about this sort of thing. So, Oraz again says, not enough to reject all the self-interested psychological typecasting celebrated as benevolent understanding. Richard Reeves, Christine Ember, Chris Williamson, Scott Galloway are all enemies. Chris Williamson isn't. He's a good chap. He's making his way. I don't know the other ones. I do know Chris Williamson, though. He's not an enemy. He is a very kind man. He's a very kind-hearted man. But he is right that to be focusing on this sort of stuff. Furious Dan says, Kathy Newman says, where are all the male role models? Well, Kathy, please see your famous interview with Dr. Peterson and how you treated him. Oh, that's so good. I should have brought that up. How did I forget? How did I forget that bloody interview? The HR Haridan, the menopausal Haridan trying to tear down Jordan Peterson. And that was back in 2017, 2018, something like that, when Peterson was such a mild-mannered man. Now you can feel there's a much harder edge in him after the way they've treated him. And I'm sad to see that happen, right? Because he was a very, very lovely guy. Randy says, please watch Terminator 2 again, or for the first time. The themes and characters are super relevant right now. Manly and paranoid women, a boy without role models, and a stoic hero who teaches him. Good point. Yeah, it's interesting how... What's the kid's name? John Connor finds a fatherly role model in the Terminator, of all things, because he's got nowhere else. Nowhere else does he have one. That's a very interesting point. Corso says, men still have their places, locations that these women will never go. They're the wild places, the rough places, the forest, the ocean, the mountain, where men have always gone to find themselves. Yeah, but the thing is, one, they're not places where you can socialize easily, right? But two, it's not really exclusive, right? What you want is something that is exclusively for men, right? That's where it's culturally understood that this is where men can socialize and not be expected to be under the pressures and auspices of women. Stephen says, someone's probably already said this, but that one meme nailed it. I love you, girl. Girl leaves. She's such a bitch. And for guys, die fucker. Guy leaves. He's such a great guy, isn't he? Yeah, no, that's exactly, and that's exactly what men are like. Like, I've never known a man to badmouth another man behind their back, even if they have to say something bad about the guy. Like, they'll say it in a way that isn't to destroy his character, right? And to destroy your friendship with him. Like, say, well, look, he is like this, but he's not all bad, or something like this, right? Like, they won't try and poison you against him in his absence, or at least I've never encountered that. Maybe like millennial men do, because fucking... Spinner Pete says, HR are the same as Soviet commissars. We never left the EU-SSR. Yeah, no, it is. It's very much exactly that. Generico again, he's quiet, yet withdrawn, and yet polite. Translates into, he isn't actively engaging with our long-house society. Why would he? These people have no idea what they've created or that they are its maker. I know, and that's the point, isn't it? This is the product of your system. You did this. You did this to them. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. I mean, if young girls were like committing suicide, if we lived in a hyper masculine culture and young girls were committing suicide at a 2-to-1 ratio to young boys, I'd be like, look, guys, we are doing something to the women, right? We must be doing something to them because of the hyper masculinized culture. Maybe they can have somewhere to go away from us. You know, I'd be deeply sympathetic to that. Dan says, he's susceptible to being radicalized. Screech, the most radicalized people to ever have existed in society. Yes, and this is the thing. The HR Haridan types, they are unbelievably radical by any standard historically known, right? At no point in history, like in Western history anyway, has it been even contemplated or countenanced that women should have total domination over society. And the only place I can think of that it really has is in Aristophanes' Assembly Women, where basically it's a parody of what would happen if women took over. But we're kind of seeing it playing out now, actually. So, you know, they knew it would be a bad idea. We're doing it. It's a bad idea. Cameron says, this reminds me of that one journalist who went undercover for a man. Yeah, that's Nora Vincent. She committed suicide because of her experiences living as a man. And she said, look, being a man is actually very lonely. Because, again, being a man, right, a lot of it is based on an honor culture that women just don't share. This is why we don't badmouth guys while they're not here, right? We live in an honor culture as men. Women don't live in that. Right? Women live in a dignity culture. And so women are like, oh, well, I've got to make sure she feels dignified in my presence. I'm going to say whatever I want behind her back. And that's not, I don't think that's good. I don't like that, frankly. And I don't think women should do that. I think that's kind of the worst aspects of what sort of women's culture is like. But, you know, men's culture has got, you know, negative aspects too, blah, blah, blah. But, like, we're just different. We're just not the same. Callum says, I sadly lost my brother to suicide in prison last year. He was pressured into converting to Islam. I'm really sorry to hear that, man. Richard says, I bet if they saw a video of Karl Franz saying the nation calls, they'd have an aneurysm. I haven't seen that. Mr. J is starting to hate, says George. Yeah, exactly. Mr. J is starting to be like, okay, there's no way out of this, is there? You know, no one's coming to save me. You know, that's the issue. The Dangerous Book for Boys is £3.80 on World of Books. Also, Islander Volume 3 is fantastic and stands proudly on my bookshelves. Well, thank you very much. I think there may be some US copies of Islander left, but the British and rest of the world, so Europe and everywhere else in the world, they're all sold out, I'm afraid. So if you're in America, you still, I think, can get a couple of copies, but everyone else, I'm afraid, you've missed the chance. Many apologies. But I'm sure you'll be able to get Islander 4. We'll probably do a bigger print run of Islander 4. Islander's been a roaring success, and thank you, by the way, for the kind words. We've had nothing but glowing praise. I've yet to see a negative comment about it because it is an incredible product. George says, why should Mr. Jaste be made to cooperate with the unempathetic Longhouse Karen and the Council of Cucks? Yeah, that's a great question, right? A question you should be able to, or what? What happens? What happens? You know, I might want to choose the alternative to being interrogated by the hateful. Again, Karen's not the right word, because Karens are a bit more traditional, actually. But by the HR mom, school mom. What happens if I don't? You know, kick me out. Do whatever you need to do. You know, I'm sick of this. Avikin says, what I want to know is how you English have tolerated your daughters being culturally enriched without going full Christchurch. Where's your pride? It's not our daughters. That's the point, right? The point. And again, this fucking American attitude. You don't understand it here. Calm the fuck down. If it was our daughters, things would be going mental. But what it is the vulnerable girls who don't have their families to help them. And when they do, the entire state apparatus intervenes, and it's against the working class as well. It's not against the middle class, you know. So it's what we've done is essentially said, no, this area of society is a worthy sacrifice, and they're too small and powerless to do anything about it. And I mean, things are changing, thankfully. You know, the discourse is out. The Overton window on this has shifted, but you don't understand us, right? You don't understand what's happened either. The last Russian says, the average woman hates the average man, hypergamy. No, I don't think they do. It's that they don't need anything from them, right? They don't hate them. They're kind of contemptuous of them, right? They're like, well, he gets paid less than me because I was promoted because I was a woman and he wasn't. So he's not even my boss. I'm his boss. Why would I want to date him? You know, it's contempt. It's not hate. They're kind of like, they're kind of sexless, I think, to the average woman. The average woman finds the average man a sexless entity because he's unable to gain any status in society. And status is a large component of what women look for in a man. But again, it's not just bad for the men, it's bad for the women because they're the ones who are going to find themselves old and alone. And there are already a million articles. I was betrayed by feminism. I didn't get what I want because of feminism. Well, yeah, this is true, and this is what the world is. And maybe if that's said enough times over and over and over, somehow things will change. Carpi says, your ideology is that of a Tuscan Raider. Based. Stop letting your amygdala and id dictate everything in your life. That's the problem with rightoids. You don't understand. This is a core part of what it is to be a human being, right? Especially, and there are lots of women who have got a strong spirited part as well. Posey Parker's a great example. And this is the sort of thing, the Karens are actually quite spirited. They're actually, quite thymotic. And so they're not really the HR ladies. The HR ladies aren't like that. What the HR ladies are trying to do is impose a cruel order that personally benefits them. They're a lot more in the mold of like Jafar than they are the sort of, Mary Whitehouse sort of HR, the Karen, So I do think a distinction needs to be made there. Al Carnally says, thanks for all the good things you do, Carl. Well, thank you very much. I'm doing my best. I work all the goddamn hours of the day. And like in like a year's time or something, hopefully you'll see what I'm working on at the moment that I can't really reveal. Coit says, Jesus Christ is Lord. Do not convert to the cult of Muhammad. Return to Jesus Christ in the Bible. That would be a bloody good start. Generico says, of course they want white boys to die in the foreign wars. They think your death is the only thing of virtue that you have to give to their perfect society. Yeah, I mean, the fact that these kind of people exist is one of the things in society that's everything that society, that they're trying to iron all of this out. So eventually there are no straight white young men who feel like they possess something of a society of their own, right? The point is, he's saying that he thinks British society is being, under attack by Islamic extremism or Islamification, or that, he's worried about himself as a man or something like this. Like, these people are the issue that they have, and they're like, he can't have access to any of this. I want him to feel broken. I want him to essentially think there's no way out of this. Blaze says, as Gen Z, I have a better understanding of morality, psychology, and philosophy than any of the men surrounding me. It's disappointing. Thank you for saving me from the dark path I was doomed to. Well, that's the thing, right? A lot of the men now are basically the geldings, right? They don't understand that they are... A lot of them are too old to change, frankly. But there was a thing that said, like, Gen Z men in America are way more right-wing than boomer men now. It's like, great. That's really great. Like, that's the only thing that's going to save you guys, right? It's the only thing that's going to save us. Pete says, Sargon sending my prayers over the pond to the American vassal state. Thank you very much. Hope gain independence from the empire one day. Well, did you see that Trump was like, I'd like the US to join the Commonwealth or something? It's like, what? What are you talking about? Why would you want that? Anyway. Blueberry says, livestream played the Isle with the lads. All of you guys go crocodile and then swim around enforcing your British authority. Plays the British Navy Crocs. That's a good idea, actually. I might do that. George says, crowdfunding for a secret hidden anti-wife 1950s type man bank account so you can buy more orcs. I'm also painting a Space Marine. I don't have an orc army. The thing is, I want to paint every model that I paint to the best of my ability, and that would mean painting an orc army would take me just forever, and I probably won't live long enough to finish it. And I don't like playing with unpainted models. Vitaly says, it's all very simple, really. Women cannot love men anymore. They are incapable of feminism, be damned. They are far more materialist and will exploit you. There is a lot of this. Feminism's materialist nature has definitely done a number on a large number of women who are more focused on their personal material rights and property and quality of life rather than living in a romantic story with a man, which is terrible, really, when you think about it. It's really terrible. And I do wonder if Zoomer women and men are even capable of falling in love anymore, right? Their entire lives seem to be totally transactional. And I genuinely, I don't think about the things that Zoomer men think about when I was young, right? I was falling in love with girls, and then I got married and with one that I did love, and we've had kids and everything's been great. I didn't have any of these problems. And I'm not trying to flex or anything like that, obviously, what I'm trying to say is how the world has changed, right? It's been within my lifetime that feminism has done this. You know, Zoomers won't remember a time before it, but I remember a time before it. And it was really nice. The world wasn't against you. Andre said, just came back from a looking for growth conference where Cummings was too, and they made your just want to go back to playing video games joke. Keep it up. Well, the thing is, right, and there's the Solzhenitsyn quote about, look, the man who just wants to be left alone is the worst kind of man to make an enemy of, because he already dies when you force him into the fight, right? When you force him onto this new path, he's had to sacrifice his old self. There is no going back to just playing video games and letting the world operate itself. No. Right? No, the only way out is through, and the only way through is to conceive of and then instantiate a new moral order of the world. And Zoomer men are going to have to be the guys who vote for this, and of course Zoomer women voting for this, and make it happen. You know, when the boomers finally pass on and the millennials as a small demographic cohort can't resist. Like, you know, the Gen Xers, we're quite right-wing, actually, the way things are now. It was Gen Xers that put Trump in power. We actually are still sort of in the meat of it, in the bones, quite traditional, because we weren't actually very well propagandized, right? A lot of the time we were kind of left to our own devices, and that's why you get like grunge and stuff like this, where it's just like, I don't really understand why I feel the way I feel. And then if you look at the early 2000s and like the late 90s, a lot of it is just, I hate modernity. Right? A lot of Gen X culture is, I hate modernity. I don't want to work for a corporation. I don't want any of these things. I want to live a genuinely human life where I fight great evils and I fall in love and I do romantic, heroic things. That was the spirit of Gen X. And I think a lot of them see that in Trump, frankly. You know, I genuinely do. And so, you know, there's no going back. There's only forward. The person that we used to be is dead, and we are now making ourselves into the men of the future. And to be honest with you, I'm really pleased with how we're doing. Like, Islander is a great example of this. Like, 10 years ago, I couldn't have done, or not just me, but like the team, we couldn't have done what Islander is. We didn't have the skills, we didn't have the insight, we didn't have the education, but we've been through this, right? We've been through it all, and now we are able to create something that's genuinely beautiful, genuinely aesthetically just meaningful, and with essays and lectures and poems and stories that mean something, that are genuinely meaningful. I mean, look at all the great comments we're getting, you know, that genuinely resonate with people. I mean, I was reading it and I was like, yeah, no. And that's why I made the video on it the other day. I was like, you know, this really is important, right? This is an important point that it's just not being recognized. You didn't say anywhere else. Like, we are on the intellectual cutting edge of this stuff, and this wouldn't have been possible if we were just schlubs playing video games. You know, if we hadn't done the work. The old you is dead. The new you is going to be sharp as anything, like scalpel like, you know, and you're all on this journey with us, and this is why you're here. So don't worry. And I'm glad to see that we got, you know, we've got our influences everywhere, but like, don't think there's any going back. There's not, but the future is going to be brighter, right? The future will be better. Pale Horse says, show your sons Conan the Barbarian Chad energy. I will let them watch Conan when they're a bit older. I can't remember if there's any sex or swearing in Conan the Barbarian. I know there is in like the books and stuff. I can't remember in the films if there is. So, you know, just anyway. Sorry, I'm just refreshing it. They're obsessed with Andrew Tate. Yeah, they are obsessed with Andrew Tate because Andrew Tate is just a representative, the biggest representative. I think Andrew Tate is famous on a level that most people don't understand. Like, everyone everywhere knows who Andrew Tate is because he's been either so well received by dispossessed young men or so vilified by the menopausal women who hate him, right? So, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of Andrew Tate. I don't approve of the way he's made his money. I don't approve of the way he lives his life. But I see him as a symptom and a consequence of this system. And I think it's inevitable that an Andrew Tate comes along. So you made Andrew Tate what he is. You know, if like I don't see how Andrew Tate would have gained much purchase with my generation, because we had girlfriends, we had a future. You know, you could, like, you weren't being discriminated against going to university or whatever. You know, there was no like anti-white male activism in the institutions, or at least, you know, nothing formal anyway. Nothing, and even if there was, it was going to be fairly fringe. It wasn't like the mainstream of the institution like it is now. So I don't see how an Andrew Tate would have really been possible. And in fact, the sort of people who would have been like Andrew Tate were kind of comedians, you know. They weren't serious. But Generico, men don't have men's only spaces. All right then, Carl. Men's Club of the Lotus Eaters when? It would be illegal. It would be illegal for us to not allow women to go into it. It's literally, we can't do that, right? Danka says, hey, just working on my vehicle in my company shop. I just replaced my engine. That sounds awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. Last one seized up, and I'm putting the finishing touches for it to work properly so I can get back on the truck on the road. It's a Blazer 2001. Can I be honest? I don't know anything about cars, but I do love working on things. I love, like, when I was crafting the walking sticks, I was just having a good time making them. And I made like half a dozen just for the fun of it. Lone Wolf and Cub says it was not preached by the state. Yeah, now that's, and again, they think they can use the state to tamp down on this, but that's what Kipling is pointing out. It's like, look, when this comes, and it's coming, you won't be able to stop it because it will be a consequence of everyday life, right? And Mr. Jaste, everything he was saying was a consequence of his everyday life. Like the Tates, the online forums, these are all downstream of what is happening to him on a daily basis. As an American, we have no place to talk about grooming gangs. We have the exact same problem, and I can't really read the rest of that on YouTube. Sorry. Colossal failure. I'm late to the thymos party. Please define. So this is Plato's tripartite soul, where you have the appetitive part, which is your physical desires to eat, to have sex, to sleep, to go to the toilet, blah blah blah. Then you have the logos, which is the rational part, which is your conscious thinking mind, and then Plato said you've got the thymotic part. Is rendered in English as thumos or thymos. I use thymos because it sounds better than thumos. But this is the spirited part, the part of you that stands up for yourself and says, no, I deserve to be treated better than this. And this is the part of yourself that Hegel is talking about in his idealistic dialectic. Like the part that demands recognition from your fellow man and respect. Right? That's the part. And that's what they're trying to beat down in these HR interrogations. Carl and Homath conversation when? Don't know. I mean, I like Homath well enough. I've watched a few of his videos. They're concise, you know. I don't know if his solutions are correct, but otherwise I quite like him. Yeah. I'm Not Your Buddy Guy says, have you seen the new sentencing guidelines in the UK? Yes, I have, of course, where if you are a straight white man, you get a worse sentence than everyone else. Because if you're a woman or if you're non-white, you get a lower sentence for being a woman or non-white. That's how it works. Vitaly says, from a Zoomerman perspective, the only possible remedy is revocation of all feminism. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I'm not going to read the rest of that just because YouTube, you know how it is. But I agree with your point. But anyway, thank you for joining me, folks. This, I hope, has been interesting. And man, did I find all of this very frustrating. Because the thing is, we're all dancing around the issue, which is the fundamental oppression of young men, right? They are oppressing young men. That's what this is all about. And they will continue to do so until they can find a reason, until we can find a reason to make them stop. But anyway, thank you for joining me, folks, and I'll see you next time.